Chapter 4. Becoming a Queen. "Hold still, milady, please," Julienne heard from somewhere behind her in the room. Her head spun with excitement. There were so many people in her room. There must be at least twice the number of any of her previous fittings. All this fuss over one costume. The only evidence of her thoughts was the uncontrollable sparkling in her deep violet eyes. Through the flurry, she caught Sylvina's small form with a profusion of bouncy auburn curls in the corner of the room. "You look so beautiful, Jewel. Do you really think so? I hope Delmont likes it. He won't be able to keep his eyes off you." Julienne's hands waved impatiently at her side. "Please, milady, we are almost through. If you could hold still a moment longer," that voice interrupted again. "Milady, please," came another. Julienne straightened and put her fingers to her lips. If she could stand this a little while longer, she could then have Sylvina alone with her while she dressed for dinner with the Brents. She let her mind wander. Time, she thought, was so distorted. The days seemed to be passing quickly, although the seconds themselves were ticking by so slowly. The cool material against her bare legs brought her attention to her bejeweled costume, the gown worn by the Queen of Perils Perish, her most treasured romantic heroine. The Queen was a whimsical fantasy, created by her father when she was a child. Her Majesty always wore a deep purple gown to bring out the rarity of her violet eyes, and a diamond tiara with one peril stone, a jewel found only on her island, purple, of course. She loved the imaginary tales her father told her growing up, and her grandfather's stories. Now those were fantastical. He even acted them out. Grandpapa knew how to have fun, unlike some other older people she knew. She glanced accusingly around the room. She would bet her life that not one of these women had ever held secret rapier contests in unused guest rooms. The secret contest started as a form of exercise, although it was the clandestine aspect of the meetings that drew Julienne. She, her grandfather, and Sylvina were the only three who knew of the pastime. Sylvina had discovered them purely by accident. Julienne smiled, remembering that time so long ago when her friend had stumbled upon a duel between herself and grandpapa. Julienne was amazed that such a loud scream could come from such a small body. As servants came rushing from all directions, Julienne quickly yanked the screaming Sylvina into the room, slamming the door behind her while grandpapa hid the rapiers. "Rats," Julienne explained simply, as she tried ushering the hordes of servants back to where they'd come from. But they insisted they keep the unused wings as spotless as the rest of the mansion. "Yes, well, you know Sylvina. She probably saw one small mouse and, well, rats." The servants, comforted that the fault was not theirs, departed, leaving granddaughter and grandfather to explain to Sylvina that what she had discovered was their secret exercise time. Julienne honestly believed that her mother would approve if she ever uncovered their little mystery meetings. Wasn't it Monique who had once said, "To sit in one's chair, drink tea, and to sketch is all fine and well in perspective, but to sit in one's chair day in and day out, one may soon find their figure perplexive." Julienne, in turn, took this to mean everyone must exercise, either through riding or dancing or rapier contests with their grandfather. Yes, her mother would definitely approve. The sound of the bedroom door snapping closed brought her back to reality. Her mind had wandered so far into another time, she had completely missed the happenings about her. She stood alone on the pedestal, stripped to her chemise, her mother smiling from the door. They met each other in a loving embrace. Monique sat her daughter at the vanity and began to brush her long silken tresses, as she had done often over the years. Studying her daughter's reflection in the mirror, she remarked, "Julienne, you are a beauty." "Thank you, Mamma. I look like you." Monique smiled softly. "Darling, I have an important question for you." Julienne turned to her mother, eager to answer any question she may pose. Would you wish to clean Delmont's kitchen were he not at home? Julienne's eyes dropped to the silver brush in her mother's hand, and she thought back to when she put forth this prerequisite for marriage. Julienne had moped about for days after her debutante ball, leaving her family in a quandary as to what was bothering her. Finally, one night her parents had knocked on her bedroom door. "Did someone hurt you at the ball, Jujubug?" her father had asked. She shook her head and sat them down. "I don't wish to marry someone just for the sake of marriage. I know girls of my age are supposed to find their best match as soon as possible, but I would rather not marry at all than marry someone I would not wish to clean their kitchen were they not home." Monique and Pierre looked at each other, Pierre obviously distressed. "Darling, you don't ever have to marry, and either way, you will never have to clean kitchens. You will have servants, a great number of servants for those things, I promise." "Darling," Monique soothed, "I don't believe that is what she is talking about." "No, it isn't, Papa. You see, I'm pretty sure I will never meet a man who could make me want to do these things. Let me explain. I went to Abigail Noddle's the other day." "That crazy woman in the woods?" "She is not crazy, Papa. She is old. She's a witch. She works with herbs, some of which I have brought back for that knee of yours." She smiled at her father's lack of response. "Anyway, when I got there, she wasn't home, and her kitchen was a mess. So I cleaned it. Not because I had to, or because it was my mess, but just because I wanted to. For her. Because she is always kind to me and welcoming, and that is what I believe a good marriage should be built on. Do you see? That is when I realised that all my suitors are fine in one respect or the other, but I would not wish to clean their kitchens were they not at home." Monique swayed the brush to bring her daughter's attention back to her. "Juju." "Yes, I think so, Mamma. But that was a silly decision of a 16-year-old. Oh, my pet. Some of the most important decisions come from 16-year-olds, as long as you know your heart." Julienne smiled up at her. "Yes, Mamma. Always follow your heart." A few hours later, Sylvina straightened the sash about Julienne's waist and smoothed the sides of her friend's skirts. She spun Julienne about to admire her handiwork. The gown was deep maroon with ivory lace and matching Lorraine ribbon that gathered her hair in a graceful array. The bodice was cut low, but not scandalously so, to let the swells of her breasts showcase the exquisite opal pendant Delmont had gifted her. Delmont was very generous with her, and even if not involved in all her ventures, he certainly supported them. She could not ask for a better future husband. She stroked the gem, thinking how proud Papa was of making the match. He'd introduced them not 6 months ago, and everything had worked out perfectly from that day on. Papa was very proud indeed. "You look perfect as always," Sylvina told her, "and everyone awaits you downstairs." All heads turned at her entrance. Julienne flowed easily to her father's side and pressed a loving kiss on his cheek, and he smiled sheepishly under her natural tenderness. "What about me?" her grandfather called. "I want one of those." She gave him one happily. Noticing Delmont for the first time, she smiled fondly, only to meet disapproval. She knew immediately it was the low cut of her gown, and she lowered her eyes, making note she would have to help him work on his prudish attitude. He seated her silently. "Your gown is beautiful," her grandfather said loudly. Everyone turned to him. Julienne smiled. She loved him dearly, but sometimes found it difficult to ignore his peculiarities. "I once had a gown like that," he said, and Julienne had to bite her lip to keep from laughing. "No, I didn't. Not quite that colour, I don't think. Or maybe it wasn't a gown. Hell, it probably wasn't me after all." "So, Delmont," came her father's voice from ahead of the table, "I hear your business is doing well." "Yes," came his dignified voice, "very well. Trade from the ships has been extensive of late." Her father continued, What of that embezzlement charge against Parkinson, was it? Yes. He was found unequivocally guilty, and thanks to Geoffrey Glade, we proved it without doubt. All stolen assets have been returned to their rightful owners, and he faces imprisonment. Yes, Delmont's father added. My son is quite successful in most everything he does. Very successful, Lady Brent added. Julienne let her mind roam its course, wondering if she would ever be able to play the coquette with Delmont. She was to be his wife. Surely a little teasing and flirting was permissible. She would be very disappointed if it was not. She imagined walking along the moonlit beach with him, a frequent fantasy of hers in those minutes before sleep. How she loved the beach and longed to share it with Delmont. The sand would squish between their toes with every step. A full moon would hover low over the horizon, leaving a glittering trail across the deep blue water, and a warm wind would blow through their hair as mist from the crashing waves settled on their eyelashes. Delmont would stop and turn to her. She would look up into his arresting brown eyes, and he would passionately declare, "Your inconceivable beauty is arousing my senses. I am quite flustered." Julienne? Julienne, dear, are you listening? Excuse me? She blushed fervently, disorientated for a moment. Lady Brent was admiring the chain you picked from which to hang your opal, Monique said, realising her daughter's mind had wandered from the monotony of the conversation. Julienne thanked her politely and followed the conversation attentively throughout the rest of the night. When the Brents were at the door ready to depart, Julienne felt a rush of relief. She met her mother's gaze. She'd had so many strange feelings lately. It must be the Frady frights, as her grandmother had called them. Grandmama had told her she got the Frady frights before her wedding to Grandpapa. And although she had told their wedding story many, many times, it was completely different with every telling. Grandmama and Grandpapa were perfect for each other. Yes, she murmured, the Frady frights. What, dear? Monique asked with amusement in her voice. Oh, nothing. She kissed her mother's soft cheek and headed for the wide carpeted staircase in search of Sylvina. Your father went into his study, if you wish to say good night. Of course. She made her way to her father, picturing him behind his desk, a pipe in his mouth and a snifter of brandy in his hand. She knocked and opened the door. Pierre stood behind his desk, pipe in mouth, pouring a snifter of brandy. Hello, dear. Welcome. Hello, Papa. She always felt safe with her father. She remembered sitting in his lap before the fire when she was a little girl, sipping hot chocolate while he told her stories of kings and queens and fantasy lands of knights, evil witches, pirates, and men who stood only 2 feet tall. She suddenly missed those nights, realizing there wouldn't be any more. She was a young lady now, one to be soon married. Fairy tales were for children. Darling, Pierre said, you know, I would never tell you what to do, only offer advice. Correct, and I feel I should offer some now regarding Lady Brent. Awful, isn't she? That is not the point. The point is, she will soon be family, and perhaps it would make your life easier if you, well, humour her. Not my choice of phrasing, but the same objective, I suppose. I will try, Papa, but it won't be easy. Jujubug. Life is not always easy. The door opened softly, and Monique entered carrying 2 small boxes. Ah, the jewels, Pierre said, and gestured for everyone to sit. What jewels, Papa? The jewels for your Queen of Perils Parish costume. But we already have the jewellery for my costume, she countered. These are special. Monique handed her the smallest box first. Julienne noted the anticipation coming from her parents and carefully opened it to reveal 2 teardrop diamond earrings. They flickered colours in all directions. Go on, dear. Try them on. Julienne looked at her mother and then at her father. She picked one up and held it dangling in her hand. She watched the colours jetting across her palm. It felt like she was cradling a star. Once both earrings were secure, she swore she could feel her hair shimmering with the reflected light. They were the most fantastic jewels she had ever seen. "Now open this one," Monique said excitedly, handing her the larger box. Again, she carefully lifted the lid, exposing her next starlit box. Julienne's breath caught. Inside was a tiara set with dazzling diamonds surrounding one large purple stone, like the one the Queen wore in her father's stories. Monique took the tiara and placed it on her daughter's head. Julienne needn't look in the mirror for her reflection. She could see it clearly in her mother's eyes. "Grandpapa made this for you. This purple gem is a perilous stone." "Like the stone in the necklace he made you, and Papa's neckpin?" "Yes, darling," began Pierre, unable to tear his eyes from the vision his daughter portrayed. "Perilous stone? That is a real stone? I thought that was just part of the tales you told me." "We have decided it is time now you know the truth. These are the actual jewels that were worn by the Queen of Perils Perish," Pierre exclaimed. "You see, the stories we shared by the fire are more legend than fantasy. There was said to be a real queen. She was your great-great-great-grandmother." Julienne was speechless. She held tight to the box, wondering if her father had contracted Grandpapa's ailment. "Yes, sweet," she heard her mother say. "It is said your ancestor was a queen of a land named Perilous. Her name was Julienne Perish. 6 stones were passed down to Grandpapa. As you know, he has made each of us a gift from those stones, and this one is yours." Julienne stared blankly. She took the tiara from her head and caressed the purple jewel. She imagined she could feel the magic of it beneath her finger. "I don't know what to say." "There are times when words aren't needed, my sweet," soothed Pierre. Julienne embraced her father. "Where is this place, Perilous?" "Well, that part is not known for sure. Different stories have it at different locations." "So all those stories are true then?" "Let's say that they are based on the truth." "Was she married? Was there a king? Who were her children? How is Grandpapa related? Are there more of these stones in the world, or only these?" Monique laughed. "We will get to all your questions in time." "There is so much to think about, and if I wear these, what are we going to do with the other jewels purchased for the costume?" "We thought perhaps the Princess of Perilous could wear them." Julienne looked at her father. "Who?" "We thought Sylvina would like to attend the ball." Julienne jumped from her seat. "I'm sure she'd love to. Her first ball." Julienne clutched the boxes close. "I have so many questions." Pierre took her hand and led her to the large armchair before the fire. "How about I tell you some stories?" "That would be wonderful." Monique excused herself as her husband and daughter cuddled into the chair. Julienne was eager to ruminate on these stories from a new perspective. Clearing his throat, Pierre began to speak in a dreamy voice. "There was once a queen of the island Perilous, with a radiance that would take your breath away. Her long black silky hair flowed freely to the floor, and her warm violet eyes turned all coldness and evil to warmth and love. Her name was Queen Julienne Perish. She was loved by all in her kingdom, and she returned their love tenfold." Late that night, Monique found them snuggled together, asleep before the glowing embers in the fireplace. Grandpapa, who had snuck in at some point during the night, was asleep on the floor at their feet like a comfortable dog. She woke them all and sent them to bed.